Commander Harrison stepped out of the shuttle and onto the Harmony Core Station. The massive space platform orbited between three star systems, built long ago by the Empire. It served as a neutral meeting place where different alien species came to talk instead of fight. Harrison wore the standard United Earth Defense Force combat armor, the same kind soldiers had worn for decades. The armor was thick and heavy, layered with steel and other metals that kept soldiers alive on dangerous planets. Dr. Lisa Grant walked beside him, her own armor clicking softly with each step. She was the chief science officer for Earth's delegation and had studied alien technology for 15 years. She knew what was waiting for them inside the station. Ambassador came next, wearing formal diplomatic clothes instead of armor. Her role was different. She would speak for humanity during the talks. Behind them walked 3 military officers and 2 more scientists. The entire team felt the weight of the moment. This was Earth's second meeting with the Alien Council. The first one had ended poorly with the and laughing at human technology. The doors to the main conference chamber slid open as they approached. The room was enormous, with a ceiling 30 meters high and walls made of something that glowed soft blue. Around a massive oval table sat representatives from 7 different alien species. They sat on the left side. They were tall beings with blue skin and silver hair that moved like water even in the still air. Their leader was Lord Ram, a diplomat who had seen 300 years pass. He wore armor that looked like liquid silver, so thin it seemed like just a layer of paint on his body. Next to him stood a weapons officer, a woman named Elle who wore armor so advanced it seemed to shift color with every movement. They occupied the center seats. They were shorter and wider than with skin that reflected light like polished chrome. Their armor was different from the more angular and sharp, but just as light and thin. The lead diplomat was called. He had already made his opinions clear during the first meeting. He did not respect human technology. The other species at the table watched silently. The merchants of the Crystalline Collective, the Harmony Keepers, and 2 others. They had come to see what humanity would offer this time. Harrison stepped forward and saluted in the human military way. His armor made a heavy clanking sound that echoed through the massive room. Every head turned to look at him. Some of the aliens did not hide their amusement. Actually laughed. His voice was rough and made a sound like grinding metal. Is that human still wearing that archaic metal shell? I thought they would have realized by now that armor like that is for primitive species. Lord Ram raised one hand and fell silent, but there was also smiling. Commander Harrison, welcome back. We see you have not updated your equipment since our last meeting. Ambassador stepped forward before Harrison could respond. The United Earth Defense Force armor is state-of-the-art for human needs. It provides protection on multiple types of worlds, in different weather conditions, and against various threats. Elle, the weapons officer, stood and walked around the table toward Harrison. She studied his armor with the look of someone examining an ancient artifact in a museum. This weighs approximately 130 kilograms, does it not? How do your soldiers move in such a burden? They train, Harrison said simply, and the weight serves a purpose. On Earth, we experience gravity-related stress that you do not. Armor needs to support the user's body while providing impact protection. The weight helps distribute force across the skeleton. Made a harsh sound that might have been laughter. So humans wrap themselves in heavy metal because they are weak. That explains much. Dr. Lisa Grant stepped closer to the table and pulled up a holographic display. The projector on her wrist created an image showing Earth's surface, with storms and volcanic activity and harsh weather systems spinning in 3 dimensions. Earth is a gravity 40% higher than most habitable planets, weather systems that generate winds over 200 kilometers per hour, temperature variations from -60 to +60 degrees Celsius. Our armor evolved to handle these conditions. She zoomed into a cross-section view of the human armor, showing the layered structure underneath. Each layer of our armor serves a specific purpose. This outer layer handles temperature extremes. This middle section absorbs kinetic impact. This inner layer distributes force to prevent injury. The total weight seems excessive to you because you design armor for controlled environments where threats are limited and predictable. Lord Ram studied the image carefully. Interesting, but surely such heavy equipment limits mobility. Our armor allows for movement speeds 3 times faster than what your soldiers can achieve. In open space combat, yes, Harrison agreed. In real planetary operations, where terrain matters and engagement happens at close range, Our armor's protection often makes the difference between victory and losing half your squad. El made a dismissive gesture. You speak of the past. Modern warfare is conducted from orbital platforms. Ground combat is obsolete. Your heavy armor is a relic from an age that has already ended. Dr. Grant turned off the hologram. Then we are fortunate that Earth was never conquered by species like yours. We survived by adapting to our world, not by assuming that one approach works everywhere. The room fell silent for a moment. The expression hardened. You show disrespect for our experience. We show confidence in our own methods, Ambassador said quietly. We are not here to prove that our way is better. We are here to negotiate trade agreements and establish peaceful relations. But understand this, we did not reach the stars by dismissing what kept us alive on Earth. Lord Ram stood from his chair. Then let us begin. We have many topics to discuss. The delegation took their seats at the table. Harrison sat in the chair assigned to military representation. He could feel the weight of the armor pressing down on him, familiar and reassuring. He had worn this armor in combat situations. He had seen it stop rounds and fragments and impacts that should have killed him. He was confident that it would protect humanity when this meeting was over. What he did not know was how soon he would need that protection. The meeting continued through the afternoon. They offered trade in advanced metals. They wanted to discuss technology sharing agreements. The crystalline collective remained silent as always. Ambassador was skilled, pushing back when necessary and compromising when it made sense. By the time evening came, the basic structure of an agreement was taking shape. As the second day of negotiations began with optimism. Ambassador had made genuine progress with the trade representatives. An agreement on mineral exchange was taking shape. They seemed willing to discuss technology sharing, though their offer was limited compared to what humans hoped for. The other species mostly observed, adding minor comments and suggestions. By midday, Harrison began to notice something wrong with the station's security systems. Small changes in the corridors outside the conference room. Fewer station personnel moving through the halls. Additional armed guards appearing at checkpoint stations where none had been before. He mentioned it quietly to Dr. Grant during the afternoon break. She had noticed the same thing. They informed Ambassador, but the diplomat wanted to continue the talks. The progress was too valuable to interrupt based on suspicion. At 1400 hours, everything changed. 3 dozen heavily armed soldiers entered the main conference chamber without announcement. The lead soldier was a commander named Vexes, a warrior from the military faction that opposed Lord Ram's diplomatic approach. Everyone in the room stood immediately, hands moving away from weapons in the universal gesture of respect for military force. This council session is terminated, Vexes announced. His voice was cold and final. The Empire revokes all agreements reached so far. We are taking control of Harmony Corps effective immediately. Lord Ram's face went pale. You are committing treason against the Empire. This will not stand. Your gentle approach is weakness, Vexes responded. The galaxy needs a stronger presence, not endless negotiation with inferior species. We are ending this now. Soldiers moved quickly through the room. They separated the human delegation from the other species. Ambassador was placed under guard. Dr. Grant and the 2 scientists were detained in a corner. The military officers with the human delegation were disarmed. Harrison kept his armor on alert status, but he knew better than to make a direct move against armed soldiers surrounding them. He had trained for hostage situations. The first rule was survival. Nothing was gained by acting without proper information. The diplomat stood firmly. This action violates the station protocols. The neutral ground agreement binds all species present. The agreement binds those who wish to be bound, Vexes said. We are past the time for binding. We are moving to action. Remove the to containment. More soldiers moved forward. They resisted, but they were outnumbered. Within minutes, they were escorted out of the chamber. The other alien species were likewise contained in various sections of the station. Vexes turned his attention to the human delegation. He walked directly toward Harrison, studying the thick armor with obvious interest. The humans wear the only real combat gear in this room? Interesting. Perhaps you are not as primitive as we assumed. What do you want? Harrison asked, keeping his voice steady. I want revolution, Vexes said simply. The old ways of the Empire have made us soft. We negotiate with species that have barely reached space capability. We trade with worlds that have nothing to offer. I am changing this. The military will take control, and we will reshape the galaxy according to our vision." He gestured to his weapons officer. "Bring out the Nexus cannon." 3 soldiers wheeled a massive device into the conference chamber. It was like nothing the humans had ever seen. The barrel was 3 meters long and seemed to glow with contained energy. Cables connected it to a power generator that hummed with intensity. The entire weapon radiated danger in a way that made Harrison's military instincts scream warnings. "This is our new primary weapon," Vexes explained. "Nexus cannon technology, developed in secret by our weapons research division. It fires concentrated plasma energy at velocities that no known shield system can withstand. This weapon will force every species in the galaxy to acknowledge superiority." Dr. Grant spoke up from her position under guard. "You are making a mistake. This action will unite every other species against you." "Perhaps," Vexes said, "but by then we will control the space station and the surrounding region. The Harmony Core will become a fortress. The diplomatic era is over." The Nexus cannon was wheeled into position, aimed directly at the corridor where the other alien delegations were being held. Vexes walked to the weapon's controls and began the charging sequence. The weapon hummed louder, the energy building with each passing second. "Let me demonstrate," he said. "Watch as this weapon proves that the way is the only way forward." Harrison moved slightly closer to Dr. Grant. His hand rested on one of the armor plates at his side, an unconscious gesture that helped him think. The Nexus cannon continued charging. "You should understand," Harrison said quietly to Vexes, "that many of the species in this station have defensive technology you have never seen. Attacking them with this weapon is a mistake." Vexes turned to him. "The humans still believe they have something to teach us. That is amusing. Your species has existed in space for barely 3 decades. You know nothing of true warfare." He returned to the weapon controls and pulled the final lever that would fire the Nexus cannon. The weapon vibrated as energy discharged through its barrel in a brilliant flash of blue-white plasma. The corridor filled with heat and light. The blast traveled down the hallway toward the containment area where the other delegations were being held. Inside that corridor, the other alien species erected their defensive shields. The energy barriers flickered to life, designed to protect against almost any known weapon. For a moment, the shields held strong. Then the Nexus cannon's blast reached its full intensity. The shields began to fail immediately. The weapon's power was too great. The aliens scrambled for cover, but there was nowhere to go. The soldiers in the corridor were already moving toward emergency exits, having been warned of the test. Harrison saw the situation immediately. The blast would continue for seconds more. People would die. The corridor was in line of sight from the conference chamber. Anyone standing in the wrong position would be caught in the overflow energy. He made his decision. Harrison ran toward Ambassador, his heavy armor thundering against the floor with each step. The soldiers guarding them were distracted by the cannon's firing. He grabbed the Ambassador and pulled her behind his own body. Using his bulk and armor to shield her from the blast, the plasma energy hit like the impact of a falling star. The heat reached 3,000 degrees in the first millisecond. The shockwave from the blast moved faster than sound, carrying force that could crush steel. The light was so bright that everyone in the chamber had to close their eyes against the glare. Commander Harrison felt every bit of that impact strike his back and shoulders. The armor took the first wave of heat and energy. The outer layer immediately began to absorb and diffuse the thermal radiation. The compound metallic structure channeled the force downward and outward rather than letting it concentrate in one spot. Harrison's body went rigid from the intensity of the impact, but he did not fall. His legs braced against the floor, his armor distributing the massive force across his entire frame. Ambassador crouched behind him, pressed against his back armor. She felt the heat wash over them both, but the worst of it was blocked. Her formal clothes would have burned away in seconds if exposed directly. Instead, she stayed shielded behind Harrison's thick combat armor, safe in the pocket of protection that the commander's body and equipment created. The blast lasted for 3 full seconds, feeling like an eternity. 3 seconds of concentrated plasma energy that could vaporize most materials. 3 seconds of heat that would have burned the flesh from bones in an unprotected human being. Then it stopped. The Nexus cannon's energy reserve emptied. The weapon shut down automatically, unable to maintain such a massive discharge for longer than it had already fired. The light faded. The heat dissipated into the vast spaces of the station. The shockwave passed through and echoed away into the corridors beyond. For a moment, everything was silent. Commander Harrison remained motionless. His armor was still extremely hot, radiating thermal energy like a furnace. His body was in pain. Muscles burned from the stress of holding position against the blast. His lungs felt raw from breathing superheated air. His eyes were watery and his vision blurred. But he was alive, and he was still standing. Slowly, carefully, he moved one leg forward, then the other. His armor made sounds as he walked, metal components cooling rapidly in the station's environmental systems. Smoke rose from his back and shoulders where the heat had been most intense. His armor bore scorch marks in places where the surface had begun to discolor from the extreme temperature. Dr. Lisa Grant rushed toward him, her face pale with shock. "Harrison, are you alive? Say something." The commander took a deep breath. Pain shot through his chest. His ribs were cracked, he could feel it with certainty, but they were not broken through. The armor had protected his internal organs. "I am here," he managed to say, his voice rough and strained. Behind him, Ambassador stood up, checking herself for injuries. Her clothes were singed and damaged, but she had no serious burns. "Commander, you saved my life." The soldiers in the chamber stared at Harrison in absolute silence. Vexes walked toward him slowly, his expression unreadable. The weapon officer, L, moved alongside her commander. "Impossible," Vexes said quietly. "No material should survive a direct Nexus cannon blast at close range. Your armor should have melted. You should have been vaporized." "The armor is designed for extreme conditions," Harrison said. He wanted to sit down, but he forced himself to remain standing. Showing weakness now would be a mistake. "We did not design it to fail." El moved closer, studying the scorched armor with intense interest. The outer surface was blackened in places and glowing red-hot in others. She used a small instrument to measure the temperature. "This material is still above 300 degrees Celsius. The internal temperature must have been significantly hotter moments ago, yet the inner structure remains intact. This is remarkable." Around the chamber, the other soldiers were exchanging looks. The moment of absolute authority that Vexes had established was cracking. A weapon that could be withstood meant that no species was truly helpless against it. The soldiers guarding the other alien delegations hesitated. The moment gave the and other species the opportunity they needed. Emergency containment protocols activated throughout the station. Barriers rose between sections. The soldiers guarding the other delegations found themselves cut off from command and reinforcement. Within minutes, the station's own security systems, which had been compromised by Vex's infiltrators, were restored. The Harmony Corps' true security forces arrived to regain control of the main areas. The coup attempt, which had seemed so strong moments before, began to fall apart. Vexes made a desperate decision. He signaled his soldiers to fire the Nexus cannon again, but the weapon had not fully recharged. The blast that came was weaker than the first, less than 60% of the original power. The station's security shields, different from the alien delegation's personal equipment, held against this secondary attack. The soldiers surrendered within minutes. Vexes was taken into custody. Elle was restrained before she could resist. The coup was over almost as quickly as it had begun. Medical teams arrived to assist the wounded. They found the other alien delegations shaken but largely unharmed, protected by their personal shields which had held against the weaker portions of the Nexus cannon's blast. But Commander Harrison was their primary concern. Dr. Grant helped remove his armor carefully. The metal was still hot enough to burn skin. Underneath, they found second-degree burns across his shoulders and back where the heat had been most intense. His ribs showed 3 fractures on the left side. His lungs had taken in superheated air that had damaged the internal tissues slightly. But he had no life-threatening injuries. He would recover. "That was the most courageous thing I have ever seen," the medical officer said as he applied cooling gel to Harrison's burns. "You did not hesitate. You sacrificed yourself for the ambassador." "I did what needed to be done," Harrison said quietly. The pain medication was beginning to work, dulling the sharp edges of his suffering. Word spread through the station about what had happened, how the human commander had stood against the Nexus cannon, how his heavy armor, the armor that the alien species had mocked just hours before, had withstood the most powerful weapon the galaxy had yet produced. Lord Ram came to see Harrison in the medical chamber that evening. The diplomat looked sad and tired. "Your people have shown us something today that we did not expect to learn." "What is that?" Harrison asked. "That strength comes in many forms. That heavy and slow does not mean weak. That 3 days after the blast, Commander Harrison was cleared to sit up in the medical chamber. His burns were healing quickly with alien medical technology assisting the process. The cracked ribs were stabilized and would mend within a week. His lung damage was minimal and already showing improvement. He was still in considerable pain, but he was alive and recovering faster than humans normally recovered from such injuries. Dr. Lisa Grant arrived with a tablet displaying detailed scans of his armor. She had spent the last 72 hours analyzing the armor pieces both before and after the Nexus cannon blast. The results were remarkable and explained exactly why the armor had survived when it should have been destroyed. "Look at the cross-section," Dr. Grant said, showing him the images. "The outer layer here is a titanium composite with a melting point of 2200 degrees. It took the initial heat and started to melt, but that melting process was actually protective. As the surface melted, it expanded slightly and formed a barrier that reflected some of the remaining heat away." She zoomed in on the next layer. "Underneath is our standard steel layering with carbon compounds. This material is designed to absorb kinetic impact, but it also has excellent thermal diffusion properties. The energy from the heat was spread out across this layer rather than staying concentrated in one spot. Heat that might have burned through a thin material was distributed across a much larger area." Harrison studied the scan, so the heavy design was protecting against the blast. "Exactly," Dr. Grant continued. "The weight that the end mocked was crucial. Each kilogram of that armor helped distribute the force and energy. If your armor had been lighter, more like theirs, the heat would have concentrated more. The thinner material would have conducted the heat directly to your body. You would have been killed instantly." She pulled up another image showing what a lighter armor would have looked like under the same blast. The simulation was graphic. The lighter material had been completely destroyed, and the wearer inside the armor would have suffered fatal injuries within the first second of exposure. "The real genius," Dr. Grant said, "is that your armor wasn't designed for plasma blasts. It was designed for wind shear forces and impact damage and temperature fluctuations on Earth's surface. But those same properties that protected against Earth's environment also protected against a directed energy weapon. The armor did what it was built to do. It protected you." Over the following hours, she presented these findings to the assembled delegations. The scientists and the engineers sat together, studying the data with intense focus. They asked detailed questions. They requested samples of the armor materials. They wanted to understand every aspect of the design. Lord Ram listened carefully to the entire presentation. When it was finished, he stood and approached Dr. Grant directly. "Your species has been in space for a very short time, yet you created armor that surpasses weapons systems that took us years to develop. How is this possible?" "Different pressure produces different solutions," Dr. Grant said. "We did not have centuries to develop our technology. We had to make things that worked in harsh environments where we could not afford failure. When you design for extremes, you sometimes create things that are stronger than designs made for controlled conditions." She pulled up a new image showing Earth's atmosphere, its weather systems, and the seismic activity that constantly reshaped the planet's surface. "Earth is a battle. Every day, the planet tries to kill you in different ways. So we learned to build things that could survive those battles. That knowledge translated to armor that could survive things we never expected." Stood next, the diplomat looked completely different from the one who had mocked human armor 3 days before. "I said that human engineering was centuries behind galactic standards. I was wrong. Your engineering was behind us in years of development, but not in capability. We measured advancement by how far we had come from our starting point. We did not consider that different starting points lead to different destinations." He gestured to the armor pieces on display. "We designed our armor for space combat against opponents we already understood. You designed your armor for a world that was completely unknown and hostile. You had no precedent to follow. You had to innovate without the safety of tradition behind you." The weapons officer who had not been part of the coup attempt, added her own analysis. "The Nexus cannon was designed to overcome known defensive systems. Thin energy shields, advanced force barriers, specialized reactive plating. We built a weapon to defeat weapons we understood. But your armor was not designed as a weapon system. It was designed as environmental protection. We had no weapon designed for that because we had never encountered anything like it. The other species' representatives listened carefully. The merchants began taking notes. The crystalline collective, which rarely spoke, sent a communication indicating interest in examining human armor technology. Even the more distant species signaled that they wanted to learn more about Earth's engineering approach. That evening, Harrison received a visit from Ram himself. The diplomat brought with him the formal commendation of the Empire for heroism and service beyond duty. The decoration was elegant, made of materials that seemed to shift color in the light. It was one of the highest honors the military could grant. "You have changed things," Ram said as he placed the commendation on the medical chamber's table. "A week ago, humanity was seen as a curiosity, a species that had barely reached space with primitive technology. Today, humanity is seen as innovators, as engineers who can solve problems that we had not even considered." "We were lucky," Harrison said. "The armor worked because it happened to work. If the blast had been slightly different, if I had been positioned differently, the outcome might have been very different." "Perhaps," Ram agreed. "But that is how history is made, not by certainty, but by moments where individual choices meet circumstance and create change." The next morning, Ambassador officially proposed a new arrangement. The United Earth Defense Force would work with the military and the scientists on a collaborative research program. They would study human armor technology and attempt to integrate aspects of human design with alien shield systems. "We believe," said, "that our heavy design could be combined with your energy-based systems. Together, they might create something more effective than either technology alone." The proposal was accepted immediately. Research teams were formed. Exchange programs were established. Scientists and engineers from Earth would travel to and to study their technology. Alien specialists would come to Earth to learn about human design philosophy and environmental adaptation strategies. Dr. Grant found herself leading the charge. She worked with a team of engineers to create a prototype armor that combined human material science with energy technology. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. The new armor was lighter than human combat gear, but far more durable than armor. When tested against a scaled-down Nexus cannon blast, it absorbed 85% of the energy without any damage to the wearer. The message spread through the galaxy quickly. Humanity had arrived not with superior firepower or military dominance. Humanity had arrived with something more valuable, innovation that came from necessity and the wisdom to learn from it. Commander Harrison was released from the medical chamber 1 week after the blast. He walked on his own power, though pain still shot through his ribs with each step. He was offered a promotion to admiral and a position overseeing the new Joint Defense Research Initiative. He accepted without hesitation. On his final day at Harmony Corps before returning to Earth, he stood with Dr. Grant and Ambassador at the observation window. They looked out at the space between the 3 stars, watching the distant lights of different worlds belonging to different species. "We came here believing that we were seeking respect," said quietly. "We thought we needed to prove ourselves through negotiation and diplomacy. And instead we proved ourselves through armor," Dr. Grant added with a slight smile. Harrison looked at the commendation on the table next to them, shifting colors in the light. "We proved that there is more than one way to be strong, more than one way to innovate, more than one way to contribute to the galaxy." Extremists were tried in a tribunal that included representatives from all 7 major species. Vexes, the coup leader, was convicted of treason against the Empire and crimes against neutral station protocols. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote world with minimal resources. L, the weapons officer, received a shorter sentence due to her cooperation in the investigation and her decision not to escalate violence further. The other soldiers involved in the coup received varying sentences based on their level of participation. The Nexus cannon was dismantled under international supervision. Its design specifications were sealed and distributed to all allied species so that defensive systems could be developed if the weapon was ever recreated. The incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of military expansion and the unpredictability of weapons that no one fully understands. But the most important outcome was not the trials or the weapons' destruction. The most important outcome was the beginning of genuine cooperation between Earth and the galactic community. 3 months after the incident at Harmony Core, Commander Harrison stood in a research facility built jointly by human and alien engineers on Earth's orbit. The facility was called the Innovation Station, built to study and develop new technologies that combined human and alien designs. Harrison was the military commander responsible for the station's security and operations. Dr. Lisa Grant was the scientific director. She led teams of researchers from at least 15 different species. The engineers had proven to be exceptional collaborators, and the scientists brought both theoretical knowledge and practical experience. Even the more isolated species, like the merchants of, had sent representatives to contribute their expertise. The first major project had been the development of hybrid armor. As expected, combining human materials science with energy technology had produced something greater than either system alone. The hybrid armor was 70% lighter than standard human combat gear, but could withstand impacts and energy weapons that would destroy traditional armor. Testing showed that it could resist the full power of the Nexus cannon, though the wearer would still experience significant stress. The second project was developing new defensive shield systems based on human architectural principles. For centuries, alien species had built shields that were thin and relied on technology to maintain their integrity. Human architects had learned on Earth that massive structures could withstand impacts through simple physics and geometry. When these principles were applied to shield technology, the results were remarkable. Shields could now be generated that were more resilient and required less energy to maintain than previous designs. Ambassador had become Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. She worked regularly with diplomatic counterparts from every species, building relationships and establishing trade agreements. Earth had become not a curiosity, but a genuine partner in galactic affairs. The relationship between and Dr. Grant had evolved into something profound. They met regularly to discuss research and design philosophy. What had begun as professional respect grew into genuine friendship. Spent more time on Earth than on his home world. He had come to appreciate human culture and human ways of thinking. He brought with him others who were interested in learning and studying Earth. The exchange programs flourished. Human soldiers trained with military forces. Alien engineers studied on Earth's universities. Earth scientists traveled to distant worlds to learn techniques and methods that had been developed over centuries. Knowledge flowed in multiple directions, enriching everyone involved. 1 year after the coup attempt, Ram invited Harrison and Grant to visit. They traveled in a ship designed using hybrid technology, combining human and alien construction methods. The ship was stronger than either species could build alone and required less maintenance than traditional designs. On they met with the Empire's High Council. The leadership was different now, with Ram holding significant power and influence thanks to his handling of the crisis. He had used that influence to push for greater integration with other species and reduced military spending on weapons development. "You changed our entire civilization," Ram said during a formal dinner held in their honor. "Not through conquest or politics, but through the simple act of survival and defense. Your armor showed us that strength comes in many forms." Harrison was uncomfortable with this kind of recognition. "We just built what we needed to survive on our world." "Yes," Ram said, "and that is exactly what makes it profound. You did not design for dominance. You designed for survival. You did not create to conquer other species. You created to protect yourselves from your own environment. There is a moral clarity in that approach that we had lost." The High Council formally granted Earth the status of full partner species in the Alliance. This was the highest diplomatic status available, equivalent to status that had only granted to the and the Crystalline Collective. Grant attended a scientific summit where her work on adaptive engineering was presented to the assembled scientists of the Empire. She received standing ovation from researchers who represented some of the most advanced scientific minds in the galaxy. "What is your secret?" one elderly scientist asked. "How did your species develop such effective solutions in such a short time?" Dr. Grant thought about that question carefully before answering. "We had no time to overthink things. We had to solve problems quickly or die. That necessity forced us to be creative. We could not afford to perfect something over decades. We had to make it work now. That pressure created innovation." She paused and looked out at the assembled scientists. "Your civilization has centuries of tradition and proven methods. That gives you stability and consistency. but it also means you sometimes avoid trying new approaches. You know what works, so you keep building variations on those known methods. Humans had no known methods. We had to try everything. Some of it failed, but some of it worked in unexpected ways. The message resonated with the scientific community. Within 6 months, research programs had been restructured at major universities to encourage rapid prototyping and experimental approaches alongside traditional research methods. The emphasis was no longer entirely on perfecting known systems, but on encouraging innovation and trying new approaches. The most remarkable change came when the formally acknowledged that human armor engineering was equivalent in quality to their own shield technology design. This equivalence of status meant that human engineers held equal authority in research and design meetings. Human innovations were treated with the same respect as ideas from species that had been developing technology for thousands of years. News spread through the galactic network about how human armor had withstood the Nexus cannon. The story was told and retold, changing slightly with each transmission, but keeping its essential truth. A young species with heavy armor and simple technology had survived a weapon designed to kill them because they had built based on survival necessity rather than technological fashion. Species that had previously shown little interest in Earth now requested direct diplomatic contact. Trade offers arrived from worlds light years away. Scientists requested access to human designs and manufacturing processes. The United Earth Defense Force received more requests for military training and equipment exchange than it could handle. Commander Harrison found himself managing not just Earth's military interests, but serving as a military advisor to multiple alien governments. He worked with generals on strategy. He consulted with commanders on force structure and deployment. He advised merchants on defensive systems for commercial vessels. It was exhausting work, but it was important work. Every decision he made could affect thousands of lives. Every design recommendation could influence how future battles were fought. 2 years after the Harmony Core incident, Harrison stood once again at an observation window in space. This time, he was alone, looking out at the vast emptiness between stars. His ribs had healed completely. His burns had faded to thin scars that were barely visible. He was stronger than he had been before the blast, having recovered and trained to compensate for his injuries. He thought back to the moment when he had made the decision to shield Ambassador. It had not been a calculated choice. He had simply acted on instinct, on the core human need to protect others. He had not thought about the armor or whether it would survive. He had only thought about getting between the danger and an innocent person. That simple act of humanity, combined with the strength of armor built on necessity rather than theory, had changed everything. It had changed how the galaxy viewed Earth. It had changed how multiple species approached technology and research. It had changed the course of history for a young civilization barely finding its place among the stars. Dr. Grant found him at the window. She stood beside him quietly for a moment before speaking. "I was thinking about how this all started with them laughing at us." Harrison smiled slightly. "They were not entirely wrong to doubt us at first. We were inexperienced. We had not been in space long." "But we survived," Grant said. "And more than that, we thrived. We brought something new to the galaxy, not because we were more advanced, but because we thought differently." "And we had armor," Harrison added with quiet humor. Grant laughed. "Yes, that too, we had armor." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars spin slowly around them. Below, in the innovation station, thousands of researchers from multiple species worked on projects that combined human innovation with alien knowledge. Ships were being built using hybrid technology. Defense systems were being tested. Medical treatments were being developed that could help any species. Trade goods were being produced that no single civilization could have created alone. The future of the galaxy had changed in the moment when an exhausted human commander decided to shield someone else's life with his own body and armor. It had changed because that armor, born from the harsh necessity of surviving on a, was stronger than the weapons designed by species with all the advantages of centuries. Sometimes history turned on small moments. Sometimes the greatest changes came from simple choices made in desperate situations. And sometimes, the things that others mocked for being different or primitive ended up being exactly what was needed to save everyone. Commander Harrison looked out at the stars and knew that Earth had finally found its place in the galaxy. Not as equals to species that had been among the stars for, but as innovators who could teach the ancient civilizations new ways to think and new ways to survive. As a species that had built armor on a harsh world and discovered that armor could withstand anything the galaxy could throw at them. The age of humanity's isolation had ended. The age of humanity's contribution had begun, and it had all started with armor that was too heavy, too primitive, and too effective. The three humans stood in silence, watching the stars turn around their appointed paths. The galaxy had changed, and Earth's place in it had changed forever. Does not mean inferior, Ram paused. I apologize for our arrogance. Came as well, the diplomat who had laughed at human armor just one day before. He brought with him the remains of human armor pieces that had been recovered from the corridor. Some were damaged, some were not. All of them showed the characteristic black scorch marks. This armor, said, studying the samples carefully, was designed by your people to survive on a world that wanted to kill you. A world that was more hostile than anything in this region of space. Perhaps we were wrong about your engineering. Perhaps we just designed for different needs, Dr. Grant said. She had examined the armor pieces already. The outer layer had been scorched, but the inner layers showed minimal damage. The force of the blast had been distributed and absorbed rather than concentrated. On Earth, threats come from wind and impact and temperature extremes and pressure changes. We built armor that could handle all of them. That armor happened to also handle a plasma blast better than we expected. Looked at her. I would very much like to study your armor design in detail, with your permission, of course. That permission would lead to things that neither Dr. Grant nor Commander Harrison could imagine. But that was a conversation for when Harrison was healed enough to stand. Dr. Grant shouted a warning, but Harrison was already in position. His back was to the main blast zone. He tensed, waiting for the impact. The energy reached them seconds later. Left for their rest chambers, approached Harrison in the corridor. Your armor is impressive for what it is, they said. His tone suggested he was admitting something against his better judgment. But it will not matter. When conflicts come, speed and advanced shielding will always win. History proves this. Harrison met his gaze directly. History is still being written. Let's see what the future brings. That night, Harrison slept in his armor. He always did when away from Earth. It was a soldier's habit, staying ready. Outside his chamber, the Harmony Core space station continued its rotation around the three stars, completely unaware that the next day would change everything.